Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. Tonight we are recording episode 29. I'm very excited to have another guest for our show. And before I introduce my guest, I want to introduce my book, which is A Gift from Adversity, the same title as this podcast. A Gift from Adversity, the subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. These are the experiences that I had when I was in Japan. And after I came to America, I learned so much about how this adversity affected me. And I decided to publish my book. And it came out in 2020 and it's available on Amazon. After I published my book, I've got a lot of feedbacks from a lot of people confiding me that they are also the victim of child sex abuse or homelessness, bullying, domestic violence. And I felt compelled to create a platform where people feel safe to talk about the adversity and tools that they use to overcome and a gift that came from the adversity. Tonight, I have a wonderful guest. Her name is Genesis Amaris Kemp. She's going to talk about her adversity and tools and then the gift that came from it. Hi, Genesis. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hi, Juri. Thank you so much for having me and just sharing and holding space with me.
Absolutely. So, before we start our main topic, which is the adversity, can you tell our audience your name and what you do?
My name is Genesis Amaris Kemp. I am a visionary life coach, the podcast founder and host of Gems Podcast, and I'm also a author as well. So the title of my book is Chocolate Drop in Corporate America: From the Pit to the Palace, and I have 3 book collaborations on the market as well, and another one that will be dropping very soon.
Great. So, Genesis, what is your website or social media that people can follow?
You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Genesis Amaris Kemp. I'm also on Twitter at Genesis A Kemp, and my website is genesisamarisKemp.net.
So, people can follow Genesis Amaris Camp dot
Net.
net. Like net.
Yes.
Perfect.
And I
So, what camp? I'm sorry, I think I misspelled camp. That net. So, what can people find out on their website when they come to your website?
So on my website, there are various tabs. There's a tab for my book, Chocolate Drop. There's a tab for my podcast, a tab for my radio show, and then a features tab where you could see some of the press releases and media that I've been in. I have now been on a little over 440 podcasts as guest appearances, and today I hit 309 episodes on my own show.
Amazing. And then, what is your podcast? What do you talk about on your podcast?
So, on my podcast, I like to surround it with my core pillars, which are to educate, inspire, and motivate, all while bridging the gap and connecting the dots of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And then people can follow Genesis Amaris Camp on Instagram, Facebook, and her website is genesisamariscamp.net. So people are welcome to comment and ask some questions for us. But let's dive into our first question, which is the adversity. So, Genesis, can you please share our audience what was your adversity?
My adversity was losing my father in November 2020. My dad and I were super close. I lost him, and it came as a surprise because I had no idea that my dad was going to pass as soon as he did. He was only 64 years old, and I definitely feel like the pandemic contributed a lot to that because the hospitals were obviously overpopulated with patients and understaffed with doctors and nurses, and some things went overlooked and underlooked. But I was glad that I had a chance to spend time with him and step into the role as a caregiver along with my mother and my husband to just really help him out during that time. And, he's no longer suffering, and just going through the grief journey is just very hard. And that adversity helped me cope with the other losses that came afterwards, like losing my Fortune 500 job in oil and gas. A week later, after my dad passed, I found out that I was going to be laid off in February of last year. Then I lost my grandmother 9 months and 5 days after my dad's passing. And then just recently, my other grandmother passed. So within a year and a half, four major losses. So that was a big adversity for me. But just going through the grief process has taught me a lot, and I'm able to help other people through that.
I'm sorry about the loss and then the job loss as well. So, let's talk a little bit more about your father. How close were you guys?
Super close. And when I say super close, like it was like my dad and we've been together ever since, I was a baby. I was hands down a daddy's girl, even though, my mom was very involved. My parents were married for 30 years up until my dad passed. And, if I needed a shopping buddy, my dad was that person. Like, if I needed somebody to go to the grocery store and push the cart and my husband wasn't able to, my dad would go. Like, so we were like two peas in a pod. Like, we were each other's ride or die. And, just to have that close connection with my dad was just such a blessing because a lot of people don't know their father or they don't have that relationship with their dad.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, when he was passing, did you have like how what was the cause of the death, if you don't mind?
So my dad was found unresponsive in his hotel room. I mean, not hotel room, sorry, his hospital room. He passed in the hospital. And it was weird because his hospital room was right across from the nurses station. So I don't know why he was found unresponsive if his room was right across from the station. Did you not check on him? Did you not make the rounds? And he passed 8 days after having a particular surgery that he had.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. It's been hard, but every day, is a new day, and I get a little bit stronger. And like I said, he's no longer suffering, and I could just remember the fond memories that we shared to just help keep me going when on the days that I do feel sad.
Yes. And then you mentioned after your dad passed that you lost your job as well.
Yes.
So what happened?
So, kind of, I felt like I lost my job pretty much out of spite because during this whole time, when I was working remotely, my colleagues were going back into the office because some of the restrictions had loosened up. And I pretty much told my supervisor that I wasn't going to go back to the office. Number one, we were still in the pandemic. And then number two, I had my elderly parents here. So my dad came home for a little bit to do home health, and then my mom. So I didn't want to put them at risk by being exposed to my colleagues where I don't know where they've been. I don't know if they're vaccinated or unvaccinated. So I just wanted to protect my family plus my husband. And at that point my dad was high risk because when he came home with a bed sore that he got from the hospital that turned into an open wound. Plus with him being a diabetic patient, that was another added layer that I had to be mindful of because we had to bathe him and change him and etc. So I wanted to make sure that I was protecting protecting him from bringing anything home and etc. So when I said that, my supervisor, I knew she was on the defense, and she pretty much said, I don't understand why you can't hire a nurse to take care of your dad. And I felt like that was very insensitive. So then that led her and I to, have an exchange of words. Then previous to that, there was a time where we weren't seeing eye to eye, and I did have to go to human resources to talk about certain things because I just felt like it was becoming a hostile work environment. On top of me fighting for equality with my pay. There was a big gender gap between me and my colleagues. I was at a CL level 15. CL level stands for classification level, and my peers were starting off at a 22. So you see the big jump there. And I was like, I just don't understand that because I'm doing the same amount of work. And then around that time, I was also traveling for the company and representing the company in various meetings. So there was numerous factors that played into it. And I think just the tip of the iceberg was me refusing to go back into work because I've been working from home all this time. I've been meeting my deadlines, meeting the metrics. I don't see why I can't continue to work from home since my family dynamics and structure has changed.
So suddenly, like they said, you can go.
Well, it was after, so fast forwarding, I'm going to cut out bits and pieces just so I'm not long winded. So, fast forwarding, after the whole George Floyd incident happened, the whole Black Lives Matter movement was birthed out of that. And I had spoke up in the supply chain vice president's meeting whenever he was asking people to either volunteer and share their story with either personal racism or professional racism. And some of my colleagues had volunteered to speak. I didn't say anything because I was like, oh, let me just test out the waters because you could either put yourself out there and then face the consequences. So when he called on me, I shared my personal story, which is, I'm first generation American and I'm involved in a multicultural family where some of my in-laws are non-African American. So there's white, my sister's kids are half white, my brother's kids are half Indian, and my other brother, his wife is truly African. She's from Cameroon. So I shared kind of some of the racism that I endure just going out places with my nieces and nephew and how people look at you whenever there is a kid that does not look like they are black or melanated. And then I shared my professional side of racism, where I started with this particular oil and gas company in 2013 as an admin. Fast forwarding to 2020, I was still being ranked as an admin, even though I was on my second professional assignment. And I was having these great performance reviews, but the salary was not equivalent to the work that I was doing. And 1 week after I spoke up, I got a $20,000 salary increase, and they bumped my classification level from a 15 to a 22. Then, fast forwarding months later, I found out that I was being laid off. So I was like, obviously, something did not make sense there.
That is very, very um strange timing wise that you got raised and you got laid off.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Nope, it doesn't. So I put all of that in my book and just wrote my story. And um, it took a lot to write the book, but I know by having the book out on the market, other people felt comfortable in coming forward and sharing their stories. Like one guy had a similar issue working for the US government, of all things. And former President Obama got involved in his story with him and his daughter and etc. And just to hear that my book made an impact on him so much that he chose to finally come out and share his story was incredible.
Yes.
And I actually have his book next to me. Well, this is my book. And then his book is called The Unexpected Journey of Fire and Gold. And it was next to, well, yeah, I can't, it's a little bit further away. But yeah, so Dietrich L. Moon and his daughter was a co-author as well.
Wow. So I grew up in Japan where there was not so much racism. We only have Japanese people, except there's this untouchable. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called buraku, and that is stemmed from kind of caste system that we had when we were isolated country in Edo era, and then like about 400 years in like 1800 or so. Then that still exists in Japan. So that people they look same, they look the same, but their background in a way that when you marry somebody, like you can't marry outside of the untouchable, like buraku people. So I met one girl who not blamed me, but like told me that you are lucky that you can marry anyone. I cannot. So yeah, it's very touchy, taboo subject for us. So I didn't really face that, but some people did. In that, some people still do in Japan. But I'm a journalist, and I covered the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, like protests and stuff. And oftentimes, like I when I interviewed people, it was interesting because some of the white people were saying that this is our time to speak out because we have to get angry like as white people, like because nothing has happened. So this is time for us to stand up um with black people, and it was just like very empowering. But I've heard of the discrimination within the workforce, and I've heard of affirmative action, affirmative action as well. So some the close family member long time ago was white, but then this African American girl was hired, and she was not so much experience as that person, but she got higher salary, and he didn't like get promoted because of it. So there's a reverse discrimination, reverse family action as well. So it's very interesting to me because I'm from Japan, where I am more like observant of these issues. However, since I became a journalist, I'm more frontline, listening to people and being very unbiased, and then learning about different issues. But when you are facing that in the middle of especially pandemic and job loss, and your father's loss, that might have affected your mental health. How did you deal with that?
So, some things that I did to help me stay grounded with whatever was going on was journaling, listening to music, finding a good support system, so people that I could confide in, whether it was my family members or my very, very close friends who understood at least what I was going through because they either were laid off or they've had the loss of a loved one or etc. They were able to kind of feel what I was feeling in a sense without necessarily going through the same exact experience. And then, my faith and my spirituality is what helped me get through those dark seasons and moments.
So that was kind of leading to my second question, which was the tools that you used to overcome your adversity. So thank you for sharing that. But out of those things that you just mentioned, what do you think worked the best for you?
Definitely journaling. And the reason why I say journaling, if you would like me to elaborate, was whenever you journal things down, you're able to reflect on what you wrote. Then you could go deeper. Why did I write this? How did I feel when I wrote this? What type of emotions came from this? Was it anger? Was it sadness? Was it fear? Was it, that enough was enough? And then now that I wrote it down, I got those thoughts out of my head onto paper. So I'm no longer replaying those thoughts in my mind and pondering them over and over. I can now relate to those thoughts and connect to it.
So were you actually physically writing on a paper or notebook, or were you typing? like a Google Doc or something?
So I have a notepad that I use sometimes, and then I also will type the rest of my notes in my phone, like whichever one is closest to me based on how I'm feeling. So
Have you thought about blogging, or also is part of your book maybe stem from your journaling too?
no, my book was just very free form, so there weren't any past journals that comprised of the book. It was mainly the experiences that I endured while working for that particular Fortune 500 company.
I see. So you mentioned about pondering and then not repeating the event that was hard, like once you journal. Like how do you think that happened? Like in the brain, the process.
So the pondering.
Well, you mentioned that if you write down
Mhm.
on journal and then you are less likely to ponder or repeat the trauma or adversity when
Yes.
you journal. So how does the process work? How can you explain?
Yes. So for me, whenever you write things down, it's out in front of you. You visualize it. And when you're visualizing it, you're actually connecting with what you wrote. Versus whenever you have those thoughts in your head and you're not actioning the thoughts you have in your head, they just keep circling over and over, kind of like they're on replay or repeat. And you're not really identifying and doing the work to find out, why am I thinking this way? Is it adding value or is it taking away value? How is it causing me to feel? Is it helping me, be better mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually? Because it's just in your head. And it's like you're constantly battling with numerous thoughts on a daily basis. So if you don't address something, then it's going to keep coming up. It's going to keep reoccurring. But whenever you actually take time to write it down and action it, then you become intentional with the process.
And who suggested you to do the journaling?
I've always been a writer, like I was a creative writer in high school, so it was always something that was inside of me, and it's been an outlet for of a variety of different things that I've went through in my life, and it's just been a coping mechanism that I've used over time.
Sure. And you mentioned that sharing it with your friends with similar experiences.
Yes, so I don't share the journal entries with them because that's personal to me, but I do share like how I'm feeling and just have that open and transparent dialogue with them.
And how do you think it's important that you're able to share that with your close friends?
I think it's very important because it shows that you're human. It shows that not everything is always going to be perfect. And if you let down your walls and your barriers, they feel like, there's going to be moments where they could do the same with you because you're building a bond that's built around trust.
And then what kind of advice do you think that helped you during these difficult times that your friend gave?
So be open, be receptive, because sometimes people are going to give you feedback, and that feedback may apply or it may not apply, but you still thank the person that they cared enough to interject some feedback. Also, be willing to step outside of your comfort zone, because sometimes when you share experiences, people may give you those suggestions to try something else. And if you're not open and ready to receive, then you could block that out, and then that no longer becomes an opportunity.
Yeah, that I like that. Have you ever tried something that people suggested you to try to cope?
Yeah, definitely exercising, meditating. There was a few apps a while back. I can't remember the names right now, where they were meditating apps where you could go through guided meditations and it'll count for you. It helps you work on your breath work and etc. And just really focusing on your breathing is like vital, because like sometimes you're so busy going through the emotions, you don't kind of take time to like just sit back and be one with yourself. And I
Yeah.
think that would definitely complement, the journaling. If I do practice meditation more often, I would definitely I guess, have more clarity. And then instead of meditating often, like one thing that I do is prayer. So whether I talk to God in the shower or when I'm driving, sometimes I do that more so than meditate.
So what kind of breathing technique that you learned and then that you use that worked for you?
The deep breathing where you inhale, hold it, and then exhale, and then just put your hand over your stomach and then feel your stomach extending. So just paying attention to that, and then just the slow breath work too.
So my daughter is 5 years old, and then her guidance counselor was teaching her the breathing technique of using the five fingers. And then she said, Mama, if you're nervous, you can count one and two. And then she was going through all the fingers and three.
Oh.
And then she was like tracing her finger four and then the five. So she was just tracing every finger up and down. She was breathing in and out. And I thought it was really cute. But if
Oh.
but it was very effective. I felt like, oh wow, 5 years old can teach me something, right? Coping skill.
You should definitely have her do a live demonstration just so us adults we could use that too. Because I didn't know the five finger method. Do you remember exactly how she did the five fingers? Like,
Yeah, so hold on one second. So
okay.
we let me try. So like this one, like breathe in, breathe out, and then three, like one,
Oh.
four. So you just trace it, but when you trace your finger, you just breathe in and out.
So you breathe in on the trace and then
Yeah,
out on the down.
yeah. And then you do it
Oh,
5 times because it's 5 fingers as you trace. You breathe in and out.
that's
That's what she
super
told me.
cool.
That's what she told me. Yeah. So people are using breath work. And then my favorite breath work that I did with the integration coach that I want to share with you. It was with the music, it was very intense. Diaphragm, like going back and forth, like for like almost like trance, an intense 5-10 minutes and very loud music with a lot of people. But then he told me beforehand that the mantra, which was "I'm the love that I seek." So keep saying, "I'm the love that I seek. I'm the love that I seek." And then like the breathing was so powerful, very very powerful.
Yeah, and that just kind of reminded me of something that I used to do a while back in dawn yoga, which is a different type of yoga. And whenever we were in our cool down period, we would lay on the mat and you close your eyes and you focus on breathing. And as you're breathing, you visualize your happy place. And I thought that was pretty cool because, like, you're quieting the noise around you and really getting present within.
That I like that a lot. So a gift from adversity, the vision that I had for this show is really not only to share the adversity and then just being a victim of it, but also learn the tools that you just mentioned to overcome and then a gift that came from it. But so far, this is your my episode 29, and so far my favorite part of the show actually is the tool. And because more tool that we have in our toolbox to tackle the mental health and then bring and then depression, sadness, loss, all the stuff, more tactics that we have and better prepared we are, faster we can snap out of it and then be able to go to like normal like setting of your brain. And I really feel that it's not really talked about and not so many people share.
I agree. And I feel like by not sharing your experiences and your tools, you're doing someone else a disservice and an injustice because by you sharing what has helped you can definitely help somebody else who may be going through a situation or an experience because you may be the only light. somebody else sees. You may be the only saving grace, whether it's your smile that is contagious and helps brighten up someone's day, whether it's just a hug that helps someone else feel warmth and feel a sense of love. Whether it's just a positive affirmation or a text that you could share with somebody to let them know, I see you, I hear you, and I just wanted to support you. And you don't even have to elaborate. You could just say something very short, simple, and to the point, but very meaningful, because if it's meaningful, it'll be impactful. Even a song lyric, and you may never know how sharing a song or a lyric from a song can help reshape someone's day, and the tears would start to flow because you don't know what they have locked up inside. So just being a human being and extending compassion, empathy, grace, and mercy onto someone else goes a long way versus a judgmental comment.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Genesis. I really love what you said. And then sometimes sharing can be a gift, sharing can be a help. And I've gotten great feedback from doing a gift from adversity, especially from the guests, because some of the guests said some people just stop talking about the incident or the trauma, and it feels weird or maybe has stigma to talk about it. But I think it's important that we hold a space where people feel absolutely safe, um, to talk about it, the adversity and tools. And I think more conversation we have and normalizing this issue about mental health or depression, and the stigma will go away because we don't talk about it, and it becomes like a crazy person or like a myth, or like, oh, I don't deal with the craziness or drama. It's not that. It's a fact that we went through these adversities, and you went through your adversity, and it's a fact that we go through this depression or sadness that most of the time the school or university, they never like teach you, like, how to deal with that. And then they say like a therapist finds therapist, and sometimes the wait list like 6 months, a year,
Yeah.
and then you can only see them like a week, once a week or something, right? But I like the idea that you reached out to your friends and then you have the support system. And I think it's important to know that you have maybe core close people that you trust completely, and then be able to reach out anytime. And then you can be that person. I often say the people who I feel very close to, that you're there for me. I'm here for you as well. Like, and if you need anything, if you want to share, like, make sure you know that I am here for you as well. And I think it's important that we express that verbally.
Absolutely. Have a open door policy and that 360-degree feedback.
What is 360-degree feedback?
So, 360-degree feedback is when you're giving feedback to an individual, but that individual is giving you feedback. So, it's going around in a full circle, 360 degrees. So, you're able to actively listen to what an individual is saying, and then you're also receiving the message. So, it goes both ways. It's like that give and take, or that pull and that plug and pull.
I've never heard of that. I like open door policy and 360-degree feedback. I just put on the comment. I've never heard of it. It's interesting.
Yeah, and some people use it in work settings, like we've done it in corporate settings. So, like around performance review and evaluation times, you'll see some companies will use a 360-degree feedback where the supervisor is giving feedback to their direct report, but that direct report also has a chance to give feedback to that supervisor on some things that they would like to see improved and etc.
So it's not just one-sided.
Yes, exactly.
And I like open door policy. Can you explain that?
So the open door policy means that there's nothing that is on record. It's pretty much off record where you could just kind of go in and have like a free for all while of course, maintaining a level of respect with that individual. So you're not just going to do or say anything crazy, but you're just going to put your cards on the table just like that other person will put their cards on the table without worrying about any blinders that would hinder you from engaging in a full dialogue that is going to be transparent but yet effective.
That's very eloquent. Thank you so much for the description. And I learned something new today. So, anyways, let's actually move on to the last question, which is a gift that came from the university. So, how do you describe a gift that came from university?
A gift that came from the adversity was definitely the courage to speak up, the courage to start something new. And that new thing was the podcast because not only did I start it doing solo episodes and that was the only thing I was doing, but I elevated and branched out into interview style episodes where I can now connect with other people who are different from me and we could bridge the gap by unifying based on the core pillars to educate, inspire, and motivate, and just really have coffee chat style conversations where we could shoot the breeze, talk to each other, and really learn and grow from each other. So I think that's a gift because we're able to really extend our reach because we are cross pollinating, we're collaborating, and now we're really showing that collaboration is not the new competition. Collaboration is the new key to success. And I think that's a big gift because that's a gift that's going to continue to keep on giving. Because if you touch one person and one soul, then you've done your job because you don't know who that person is going to go on and touch and impact. So I like to just say one gift that I have is my hands because my fingerprints are uniquely created for me and I'm created as a masterpiece. But by having these fingerprints, I could leave an imprint, and that imprint is driving an impact in order for me to form my own legacy and build a foundation, not just for now, but future generations to come.
That's amazing. I want to share with you some story and also to the audience, which I wrote in my book, A Gift from Adversity. But one thing I was told by a probation officer um, in Dorchester, Massachusetts, where it's high crime area, where I was doing nonprofit organization teaching music to juvenile offenders for 12 years. And I was telling him, well, I want to save everybody. I want to save the world. And then he said, well, focus on one person at a time.
Mm.
Because if you can change one person who is in a detention program, who is at risk, then if you can have internal change, that person will go back to the community and then have a ripple effect around them and have a positive change in the community.
Wow. That is like coincidental because I had no idea you were going to share a story like that. And that story is in parallel with what I just shared about having a ripple effect and touching one person.
Yes. So what you said reminded me of the probation officer, Bill Stewart, who taught me that method. And I focused on that. And then I had 300 volunteers over the 12 years. And every volunteer I told them to really focus on changing one life at a time.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, but you are doing great job. And then I'm very sorry about the adversity and then loss and then um probably the discrimination that you had to face. But I'm very happy that you were able to use your voice to empower other people that influenced other people and having the podcast platform and sharing. You never know who's listening to our podcast as well. And then you never know how our conversation can influence and impact and empower other people.
Thank you so much again, Juri, for having me on and just sharing and holding space.
Absolutely. So, Genesis, I would like you to have the last word before you go to our audience.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to choose to leave them with a quote that I'm going to grab from my book. I have a reflection quote section here. And let me find. Oh, this one is in alignment to what we talked about. Let's continue to encourage one another to be the best version of ourselves that we possibly can. Take a break from all the hustle and bustle, get in tune with your inner self, meditate, and release stress by working out, listening to music, or unplugging from the everyday madness in this world. And I think that kind of summarizes some of the basic points that I mentioned today that were in the tool section.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Genesis, again for sharing the time and your story with us. And I am really grateful. And the people, please check out Genesis Amaris Kemp.net and then follow her Instagram and Facebook as well. Well, thank you again.